Hello, my name is Christine, and this is my CLI walkthrough for my CLI project with Flatiron School. So I just wanted to present that there are two phases to what I'm going to present in this walkthrough. One would be how a user will go through using my CLI gem, and then after I will explain how I built my CLI. So let's get started. Let me clear this information here. So, reason why I chose this Baker Creek heirloom seeds rare seeds website was because I like vegetable seeds and I liked how there are a variety of types, and within those varieties there are even more varieties of seeds which come with their own description. There are more further descriptions and prices and quantities and whatnot. But for the sake of this project, I included the description for the main parent seed and description for the varieties and along with its price. So let's get started with how a user would be approaching my CLI gem. First, the user would be welcomed with a message, and then they are presented with a list of the vegetable seeds. So let's say, for instance, the user decides to choose amaranth. So let's choose number 1 for amaranth. And once they choose the seed for amaranth, which is number 1, they are presented with all the varieties of amaranth. So here we have group A for amaranth. These are all the varieties. Then we have the main description for amaranth. And at this point, they're asked if please choose the variety by its seed number. So let's say we wanted to know more about the Hopi Red Dye Amaranth, so let's choose number 7. After choosing number 7, we are presented with the main parent seed, Amaranth, and the selection that they chose, which would be number 7, Hopi Red Dye Amaranth, which would be right here. And we are given its price and its description. And then when we're done with this list, we can say done, or we can choose list. So that is a part A of my CLI of how a user will be approaching it. The reason why I say part A is that there's actually a strange web design issue or setup, how the website is done. So certain seeds, as I showed you, have the parent seed here, its parent seed description, and its list of varieties and the varieties info and the price and so forth. But there are certain seeds that didn't have that setup. For instance, we have gourds here and melons. These are two of the few that were having some issues. Well, I don't think it's an issue, it's more like a design situation. But it's still very inconsistent throughout the website. As you can see, the parent description is provided here, but none is provided here. So when it comes to a user choosing gourds or melons or the other seeds that have this particular setup, this is how they would go about choosing their seeds. Again, in a normal sense, they are presented with a message and they can view the collection of vegetable seeds. So at this point, let's just say, for example, they chose gourds. So we'll see 24 for gourds. And at this point, they are presented with varieties. It's actually more of a category. As you can see here, the parent seed is gourds, but it's become more categorized. So, but they are provided with the parent seed description. So let's say, for example, they wanted to check out all the gourds, not just the edible gourds or loofah, but they just wanted the gourds itself. At this point, they're presented with the gourds parent seed and the varieties. Here are all the varieties, and this is the parent seed description, the category seed description, excuse me, that describes what gourd is all about. And so let's say, for example, we wanted to choose the Big Apple gourd to check out the varieties. So we say number 2. So here we have the gourd itself, the category, and the variety that we've chosen as a user, which would be Big Apple Gourd, which is number 2. This is why we chose number 2. So Big Apple Gourd, the price is $3, and here are all the description for this particular variety. And then the user will either press enter done or list when they're done choosing. So we'll say done. So that's just how a 2-part usage of my CLI entails. So that's pretty much how a user will go about doing it. And I wanted to explain why I did something like this. So let's start from the very beginning. So first, I wanted to note that every seed had its own challenge, but every seed did have a particular information that I wanted to gather. So for example, for seeds, I wanted the parent seed name, which would be these guys here. These are the main parent seeds. Its URL, so if we come here, these are the main parent seeds. Its URL, in this case, if we chose Aramanth, this would be the parent seed URL, and their name, and their description. So going about doing this, I had to go to the scraper, scrape all the information I needed. So in this particular case, I named this method self-scrape parent seeds, and it's scraping the parent seed for the URL and the parent seed name. So I created my variable doc to open through Nokogiri the main vegetable seed link, which would be this page. So from here, I did my usual of inspect. And then from here, I have all the information I needed. So for example, for my Aramanth, this is the link that I am trying to scrape, which I was able to do. So I called the seeds SeedPicker seeds.new class because I want to ensure that all the information that I'm trying to save within this object gets saved. As you can see, here are my instances, which would be collected in the add all array. So here we have the URL that was scraped, which would be this particular piece here. As you can tell, it's a relative link, and I'll touch that in a bit. And we have the seed name. So with the seed name, the URL, we can pass it through here for this other scrape so we can get the parent seed description, because upon clicking the main parent seed link, we get more information which we want to scrape. In this case, we want the parent seed description, and we want the variety's name and the price, and the variety's URL, so we can further get information from about the variety seed. So what happened here is, if you go to the CLI, oops, excuse me, more like the seeds page, I was able to collect all those objects that we needed for the parent seed information from the URL and the name. And what I did was I called selfall.collect so we can gather all those instances here. And upon receiving all that information, I was able to sort it from ABC order, because as you notice, all the seeds are listed in ABC order and in the number form. That I'll get to in a bit. So once we set everything in ABC order, I actually chose to delete a couple of the seeds because some of these seeds, starting from down here, they actually become a little more categorized, more than what I showed you in terms of gourds and melons. So I decided to remove that just for the sake of this project. So once those are deleted, I was able to get all my seeds in ABC order. And at that point, I called upon that method, which had all my seeds of list, and I called it with another variable, and from there I collected those objects and put them in with an index. That way it can come out into a numbered order. And that is why in the CLI it's called SeedPicker seeds, because it's coming from this class and from this method. And that's why we have this. So that is in a nutshell of how I began my setup of my CLI. So all in all, because certain seeds, as I mentioned, have different structures, this stays relatively the same. So everything below here would be quite different. So after we list this, all the seeds, we move forward with the choose a parent method. At this point, the user will have to choose a seed of their choosing. So let's clear this away and I'll show you what's being done. So let's go back to how a normal seed structure would be selected via user. So let's say we choose error math once again, and we are presented with the variety of error math seeds. So here we have the error math seeds. So the user would choose number 1 for the seed of their choice, which would, in this case, is error math. So when the user clicks that particular number for that seed, it's actually activating the SeedPicker seeds.find method, turning the number that they chose into an integer. So we go back in here. So what this does is this method, self.find, with the number that was selected through here, and the number gets passed through into this method here. So the user chose number 1 for the seed of their choosing. So if number 1 gets passed here, self.find goes through the self.all array, which would be this particular piece. At all is the class instance that collected all the information we needed. And from here, with the number, it's allowing us to find the object, in this case the seed. We're going -1 because even though there's a list of starting with number 1, most programs count from 0, because as humans we count from 1, but programs, they count from 0. That's why if we wanted error math, this is actually 0 in terms of the program. So that's why we have number -1. So after that point, we get the seed. So the seed is just a variable for that particular number of the seed. So error math is now seed. So when we pass the seed variable into this method, the scraper.scrape variety seeds method, let's go back in here. Seed, as we mentioned before, which is this particular piece, is actually error math, the number 1. But because we have it in seeds as an object, error math would be able to get its own URL. And from there we open its URL, which would be this guy here. And using Nokogiri, we're able to scrape all the particular informations we needed here. So here we're calling a new class for varieties, because these are the varieties. So we create a new variety class, which indicates, oh, we need the seed name, we need the seed URL, and we need the seed description. And I'll touch base on this in a bit. So after we call that particular class, we pass in, no, sorry, we call it the method, the instance method that we're looking for, and we make it equal to the details that we're looking for. So variety seed name will now be a group of Aurelia's Verde Amaranth, Dreadlocks Amaranth, Elena's Rojo Amaranth, and so forth. And the same would be for the seed URL. Let me show how that works. So here we have the name of the seed, Aurelia's Verde Amaranth, which would be the text, and we have the link itself, which would be right here. It's not a relative, it's the full URL, and that's why we're able to pass it here in the other method, so we can further scrape this link to get this information here. And back to the CLI, this is how, once we get all the variety scraped from this method, and it's already in this seed class right here, we can actually do what we did previously with all the seeds here from the vegetable seed collection. We have collected all these instances of the variety seeds into an array collection in the add@all, and we included that within the self.all method. So we created the self-get-varieties method that would pass the seed, and in this case, remember, it's still number 1 for Amaranth, and we want all of its varieties to be in ABC order and within an index from 1 to the end of its list. That's why we call the self.all method, which provides us the whole collection of the objects, and we say let's collect them all again but with an index, and that's why we have the index here and the seeds variety seed name. And that is how we get this particular piece right here. Moving on to description, this is a little tricky. So even though we're still calling on the seed method, again, it's still on Amaranth because we're still on Amaranth. The description is quite odd. So we're still on Amaranth, which would be passed here. And again, we're still getting the parent seed URL. So we're still getting the Amaranth URL link, which is this particular piece. And we're scraping all that information. Because Amaranth has your normal structure, its parent seed description would be this particular Nobogiri scraper. And that's why we have this description. I'll touch base on this part in a bit. At this point, the user will click on the variety, and we'll get more information of that variety that they chose. Reason being is, after they read the description, we're actually going through another method on the CLI called choose_specs_seed. And the reason why this is done is because of the strange HTML structure that I've encountered. And it also affects how the parent seed description was scraped as well. And so after the user views this, I guess you can say a normalized description, and they move forward with this method, if any of the parent seed name would be gourds, melon, pepper, squash, or tomatoes, because these are the seeds with the inconsistent structures, it will go to this particular method, choose category seed, which would be here. But because we are still on Amaranth, and it's neither one of these parent seed names, it's just going to bump us towards the choose list of variety seeds, which would be down here. What this does is still on the normal consistent structure, and it's passing Aramanth still. So when we're passing Aramanth, and we want we still want its variety of information. So we're actually going to call the varieties seed class, which would be here, and we're going to find its list of varieties because it's still in here within the @all array. And we're, again, remember, numbers, our computers count numbers from 0, not 1. This is why we're minusing 1. So going back to the CLI, we're saying variety is this number. So the user, although they're still on seed, which is Aramanth, they wanted to view a variety. So let's say they wanted to choose number 1, Aurelia's Verde Amaranth, then they would choose 1. So variety is actually number 1 at this seed. And that is why when we call the number 1, we get this information down here. So we have the main parent seed name, which is Aramanth with the letter A right here, and we call the variety seed name because this is the variety and we're calling on the variety's instance of its seed's name right here. And then we're getting its price. It's the variety's price, and then we're getting its description. And again, the description is a little more tricky because when we click here, we're actually going to the variety's own web page. So what happened is that because we chose the variety of number 1 of Aurelia's Verde Amaranth, we're still on the parent seed Amaranth, but we're on its variety. So its variety would be this particular piece, and we're going to pass it through to our scraper method to scrape the variety details, which would be this one. So upon creating our variety object, we saved its instance of the seed URL, which would be this particular piece. Because we're passing the variety from the CLI, remember right here, we're passing it here, we're calling on the scraper variety details to grab this variety, but make sure we open that variety's seed URL. Naming convention can be a little better, but for the sake of this project, this is how I was going through my process. So now we gather that link, we're able to do a no-code scrape and grab this particular piece of the variety description. See, it says long description here, long description, and we save that under the varieties seed class right here to the instance of variety seed description, which, going back up here, will give us this guy. And that's why when we pass the scraper information here, we call on that scraper class and its scrape variety details method that will activate or pass that variety. And that is how we can call upon the variety seed description here. And that will lead us to our very last two methods to either go back or finish. So to go back or finish is just giving the user an option of either they want to choose another seed, or if they're done, click done. And if they are done, then they'll be given this cute little message saying goodbye with the little cute bunny. See? That's pretty much the gist of how that CLI Part A is all about. Let me describe how Part B will actually work. So here we have, let's say we choose gourd. So from the CLI, we go through the usual process, we go through the call method so we can get the parent seed information and going for the start method and seeing the list of seeds and choosing the parent seeds, which will bump us into the choose spec seeds. But because we chose gourd, or if we were to choose melon, peppers, squash, or tomatoes, then we're bumped into the choose category seed method, which would be this one. So we're still passing gourd, which is still a number 24, and gourd is being passed through the choose category. In this case, the category is still being read as if it were a variable, a variety, similar to how we chose Amaranth and we saw a list of all the Amaranth seeds. So if it's still being treated that way, that's why I'm calling the variety seed here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm calling on this variety, which is now the category within the scrape category varieties method. So I'm passing in the variety. In this case, I'm choosing 1 for the gourds. So seed, parent seed gourd, its category seed gourds, plural, is being passed into the scraper method for this guy. So because we previously had the variety link that were saved in here, I can pass that gourd variety and call the variety seed URL, which will automatically take us to this page should we choose gourd. This is why we have the category description right here. So going back to the CLI, that's why we have parent seed name, which is gourds, and its variety name, which is gourds. And then we have the variety seed name, which is gourds again. And we pass that variety of gourds into another method within the group variety method. So as you can see, when I call the gourds variety that came from the CLI, it activated that particular seed's URL, which we were able to scrape, and to get all their individual information, to get all this variety seed, I actually had to call another class called group variety, which I have here. And again, I'm calling for its instance of its own URL, its own variety name, and each of their own description, and the category price. So jumping back here, I pass along that variety into this method. So in this class method, the get category varieties is actually right here. So similar to what we've been doing to all the other list of varieties is that once all the instances are collected within the array, we call that method so it can bring us back the entire collection, and we iterate through those collections to get an index, and we have this information. And that brings us back to the CLI. We're going to call on the category description to get the main description, which would be this particular piece here. And from this piece, we are calling on the scraper method again by passing in the variety. So let's go back here. And here we have the variety's description. And we are calling the category description instance. However, this particular instance is actually going to be called from a category, from the variety seeds class. Reason being is that it's being treated as if it were part of the parent seed class, the parent seed. So to call or to scrape this link to get this particular piece, I had to do this, create this method. And then once that method is called and passed with that variety of choice, let's say we choose number 1, we get the category description, but then it's going to pass to the other method, choose categories varieties. It still has the seed of choice, which is gourds, and the variety that we chose, which is okocha or lady slipper gourd. And then we go through the group. So even though we chose that variety, it still needs us to figure out like where is the variety. So we go to the group variety, and it has all the categoried variety seed names, which would be all these guys here. And we will select from from the user's number choice, -1. And that is why we call group. So group is now number 1 because we chose to go with the variety seed number 1. And because of that information, since this is now in group, we are passing in group and going to the scraper class and calling on this method, scrape category varieties details, which is down here. And we are getting that varieties category varieties URL, which would be this item here, up here. And we're going to scrape all that just so we can get this long description. And we will call the group class once again. And we're calling the categories varieties description instance, which would be this piece here. So after all that's said and done, and it's been scraped, we can call on those objects. And that is why we have parent seed name, which is gourd, and the variety seed name, which is here. And with the group variety seed name right here. So parent seed name, variety seed name, and the group category varieties name. And the price is the category varieties price, called upon group, and called upon group again for the description. And then that bumps us back to the normal loop. So we either go back or finish method to let us know if we're done with this list or if you want to go back. So we're going to say we're done, and then we'll be told goodbye with our little bunny. So that's pretty much how I built my CLI. Again, it was quite challenging having to work with a website that wasn't as, I guess, structurally sound or consistent. On a user level, a user experience level, it makes sense. It's just that the design itself was very complicated, and how I was able to extract certain information on such a complex level was quite a challenge. And hopefully it makes sense to you, and if it doesn't, please let me know through comments or messages. That way I can answer your questions, or if you have a way to actually help me refactor the code, that'd be great. I believe I will be refactoring the code. In the meantime, this is all I have for now. So, like the bunny, goodbye and thank you for viewing this video.